You know what I'm saying? It's that situation when you got, we are living in a war zone. It's not as easy as these people are making us think, that they just got some criminal black kids with guns. It is not like that. We live in hell. We live in the gutter. We got us stacked up 80 deep in one building. You know, by the time you get out your house...
We're standing at the edge of a story that refuses to stay buried. Nearly 3 decades after the Quad Studios shooting that left Tupac Shakur fighting for his life, the past has resurfaced with new urgency and new controversy. This time, the spark comes from Gene Deal, a former bodyguard for Sean Diddy Combs, and a man who says he was present during some of the most volatile nights in hip-hop history. Deal has publicly accused the creators of Sean Diddy Combs, The Reckoning, the Netflix documentary executive produced by Curtis, 50 Cent Jackson, and directed by Alexandria Stapleton, of deliberately omitting material he claims could alter the public understanding of the 1994 ambush. According to Deal, he provided the production team with first-hand testimony, financial documentation, and alleged video evidence suggesting that Combs had prior knowledge of the Quad Studios shooting. None of that material appeared in the final cut when the documentary premiered on December 2, 2025. Among the most explosive claims is Deal's assertion that he personally witnessed a $1 million check connected to Jimmy Henchman Rosemond, a figure whose associates have long been linked by law enforcement and journalists to the Quad Studios incident. Deal claims the circumstances surrounding the check suggested foreknowledge of the attack, though no such evidence has been publicly verified or entered into court records related to the case. Deal says his frustration goes beyond a single omission. He alleges a broader pattern of suppression, one that spans decades, crosses state lines, and involves powerful players within the music industry. In his view, the documentary's omissions transform what could have been a reckoning into what he calls a sanitized narrative, one that raises fewer questions than it answers. The filmmakers have not publicly addressed Deal's specific claims. For now, his allegations remain unproven, but they arrive at a moment when long-dormant cases and unresolved legal questions are once again under scrutiny. Whether Deal's claims will prompt further investigation or fade into hip-hop lore remains to be seen. What is clear is that the story of Quad Studios is far from finished.
Big was that type of rapper that he could get at somebody, and I think Puff was trying to tell him, don't go that route. You understand what I'm saying? But still putting out songs like Who Shot Ya in the intro, but telling Big not to go at nobody, which was crazy.
What makes this more than just another he said, she said scandal is the timing. These allegations are surfacing as Dwayne Keefe D. Davis, the man charged with orchestrating Tupac Shakur's 1996 murder, is awaiting trial in Las Vegas, with proceedings scheduled to begin in March 2026. Davis's legal team has already signaled a defense strategy that may reopen long-standing claims that Sean Diddy Combs allegedly placed a bounty on Shakur's life, claims Combs has repeatedly denied, and that have never resulted in criminal charges against him. At the same time, Kirk Burroughs, the former Bad Boy Records co-founder, remains embroiled in a civil lawsuit against Combs centered on alleged financial misconduct and contractual manipulation. Burroughs' handwritten journals, documents the Netflix documentary relied on heavily, are said to include references to unusual car rentals and last-minute travel arrangements surrounding the nights Tupac Shakur and Christopher, the notorious B.I.G. Wallace, were killed. Those entries have fueled speculation for years, though their interpretations remain contested. That context raises a pressing question. If the documentary aimed to examine power, accountability, and unanswered mysteries, why were the most incendiary claims, the ones that could potentially link Combs, Jimmy Henchman, Rosemond, and key events leading up to the shootings, excluded? For critics like Gene Deal, the omissions don't feel accidental. They feel strategic, arriving at a moment when the past may soon be tested, not just in public opinion, but in court.
I believe him, because he wasn't talking just to be talking. I felt he was also coming straight, because there was a big war behind that. A war that they lost. And I think it was a war that destroyed their neighborhood.
The answers may lie in the legal landmines buried throughout the story. According to individuals familiar with the documentary's production, Netflix's legal team was heavily involved in shaping the final edit, scrutinizing every claim for potential defamation exposure and the risk of subpoenas tied to ongoing cases. One source close to the project claims that Gene Deal's material was considered too hot, not necessarily because it lacked credibility, but because airing it could have pulled the streamer into an expensive legal confrontation with Sean Diddy Combs, who has reportedly pushed back against the use of unauthorized footage in the series. Then there is the question of 50 Cent's own calculus. The rapper has made no secret of his long-running feud with Combs, and critics argue he would benefit from a project that further damages his rival's reputation. Yet Deal's allegations suggest the opposite may have happened, that the most incendiary claims were deliberately softened or excluded to protect the documentary's legitimacy or 50 Cent's broader business interests. In an environment shaped by active civil litigation, a pending murder trial, and the ongoing fallout from Combs's 2025 federal indictment, caution may have outweighed confrontation. Because this isn't just a story about history, it's about cases still moving through the courts, reputations still being contested, and consequences that are very much alive. And to understand how it all began, many believe you have to rewind to the night of November 30, 1994, when Tupac Shakur was ambushed in the lobby of Quad Studios.
Satisfied. I don't feel like I've ever embarrassed myself or my people, in nothing that I've done. And yet and all, I got the whole world fearing me, you know what I'm saying? At 23, weighing 160 pounds, you know what I'm saying? And I ain't even started. I haven't even wrote my plan out yet, and they scared. I got the vice president know who I am, the president, every cop in every city.
Official records confirm that Tupac Shakur was at Quad Studios on November 30, 1994, to record a verse for Little Sean, an artist signed to Uptown Records, an imprint with close ties to Sean Diddy, Combs's bad boy empire. That much is undisputed. What remains contested are the conversations that allegedly took place earlier that day behind closed doors. According to Gene Deal, Combs was allegedly present in Jimmy Henchman Roseman's office alongside Uptown executive Andre Harrell, where Shakur's expected arrival was discussed. Deal claims Roseman made it clear that Shakur, who was said to owe money to Roseman's associates, was going to be taught a lesson. If true, Deal argues, that would suggest foreknowledge of the danger Shakur was walking into and place Combs in the room where the plan was allegedly discussed. These claims have not been substantiated by court filings or sworn testimony, and Combs has denied involvement in the Quad Studios attack. Still, Deal takes issue with how the Netflix documentary framed that night. Rather than focusing on specific individuals and alleged financial disputes, the series emphasizes the broader East Coast-West Coast rivalry. Deal argues that approach diffuses responsibility. You spread the blame across an entire coast, he says, instead of zeroing in on the people who may have orchestrated the violence. Then there is the claim that continues to haunt him, the $1 million check. Deal recounts a mid-1990s encounter in which Eric Zip Martin, a figure connected to both Combs and Roseman, allegedly displayed a 7-figure check, describing it as funding for a new record label. The timing, weeks after Shakur was shot, raised red flags for Deal. He alleges the money was tied to Barry Hankerson and Roseman, two names that have repeatedly surfaced in reporting and investigations related to the Quad Studios incident. Deal says he and another associate saw the check, but received no answers when they asked about its origin. You can follow $1 million check, Deal insists. Banks keep records. Someone approved it. Someone signed it. Yet in the final documentary, financial ties are addressed only briefly through Kirk Burroughs' journals, which note unusual expenses around the time of Shakur's shooting. No check, no names, and no direct link to Combs.
He said it was, according to him, he said it was security that accepted money, participated in it, and it was so-called homies.
The omissions grow even more striking when the documentary turns to the 1997 killing of Christopher, the notorious B.I.G. Wallace. Gene Deal claims that in the days leading up to the fatal trip to Los Angeles, he repeatedly warned Sean Diddy Combs that the escalating tension between Bad Boy and Death Row Records had made Biggie a clear target. According to Deal, he urged Combs to cancel the trip altogether, arguing that the risk far outweighed any promotional benefit. Deal says those warnings were dismissed. Combs allegedly insisted the Los Angeles appearance was necessary, despite what Deal describes as multiple red flags, including what he claims was a direct warning from someone connected to the local gang scene. Hours later, Biggie was killed in a drive-by shooting, a crime that remains officially unsolved. The Netflix series does include Deal recounting the chaos of that night, but it stops short of his most serious allegation, that Combs knowingly ignored credible warnings. Deal says he even confronted Combs at Andre Harrell's home, pleading with him to call off the trip. Combs' response, according to Deal, "If you don't want to go, you don't have to," has lingered with him ever since. Deal believes those words weren't just a dismissal, but a signal to move forward regardless of the danger. What unsettles observers is that elements of his account echo concerns voiced by other figures from that era, suggesting a pattern that remains deeply uncomfortable to revisit.
Keith D said he told Rat James that, look, it's big money in this. Only thing Puffy want to do is pay $1 million to have both of them He told me that.
Mark Curry, a former Bad Boy Records artist, has added fuel to that unease. In multiple public interviews, Curry has claimed that Sean Diddy Combs became intensely focused on controlling the narrative after Biggie's death, alleging that contract terms were altered in ways that benefited the label following the rapper's passing. Those claims, while disputed, have circulated for years and reinforce questions about power and control in the aftermath of tragedy. Kirk Burroughs, the former Bad Boy co-founder whose handwritten journals formed a backbone of the Netflix documentary, has also made provocative assertions outside the series. Burroughs has suggested that Combs' jealousy over the growing friendship between Tupac Shakur and Biggie Smalls fueled manipulation of the East Coast-West Coast rivalry, claims Combs has denied. Still, Burroughs' perspective has been cited by investigators and journalists as part of the broader historical record. Then there is Dwayne Keefe D. Davis's proffer session, a taped statement given to investigators in 2018 in which he allegedly claimed Combs offered a bounty on the lives of Shakur and Marion Suge Knight. The documentary briefly acknowledges the proffer, but stops short of examining its implications, namely, that Combs' name was linked to an alleged assassination plot years before Davis was formally charged. That omission raises a final, uncomfortable question. Why would 50 Cent, who has spent years publicly mocking and accusing Combs, pull back from the most explosive material? Some insiders speculate the documentary was structured to protect Netflix from legal exposure, relying on journals and on-the-record interviews rather than riskier allegations. Others point to financial disputes, claiming Deal sought a 7-figure payout for his footage. Deal, however, believes the explanation runs deeper. They didn't want the truth, he says. They wanted a story they could control.
Very public, long-standing feud that you've had with Sean Combs. So what brought you to this project?
Well, I just want to make really hit television. I like the idea of it being exciting, and I picked this project and started working on it about 5 months before I found Alex. And I know that she has the artistic integrity that it would take to make it.
The irony is that despite its careful omissions, the documentary still managed to enrage Sean Diddy Combs. His legal team has already pushed back forcefully, labeling the series a shameful hit piece built on one-sided narratives and questionable financial motives. They've pointed to Kirk Burroughs' ongoing civil lawsuit and Gene Deal's long history of public conflict, with Combs as evidence that the project is driven more by vendettas than by facts. But that defense raises an unavoidable contradiction. If the documentary is truly one-sided and hostile, why were the most damaging allegations left out? Why avoid the alleged $1 million check, the warnings preceding Biggie Smalls' trip to Los Angeles, or the claimed meeting in Jimmy Henchman Roseman's office? And why, after decades of relative silence, is Gene Deal choosing this moment to speak, unless he believes the full story is still being buried? What remains is a narrative that feels deliberately incomplete, a puzzle missing its most revealing pieces. The series leans heavily on Burroughs' journals, yet avoids the entries that might directly implicate Combs. It shows Deal in archival footage, but excludes his most explosive claims. It acknowledges the East Coast-West Coast rivalry, while minimizing the role of executives who, according to critics, may have fueled it behind the scenes. All of this unfolds as Dwayne Keefe D. Davis's murder trial approaches, Burroughs' lawsuit inches forward, and Combs himself faces mounting legal scrutiny in federal court. The central question isn't just what was omitted from the Netflix series. It's what, or who, those omissions were meant to protect. There is another layer that complicates matters further. In the weeks following the documentary's release, industry insiders claim Combs' legal team has quietly reached out to former associates, offering settlements in exchange for silence. Deal alleges he has been approached multiple times with offers that included both money and implicit threats. He is not alone, according to sources. Several individuals who worked at Bad Boy Records during the 1990s have reportedly been contacted and encouraged to sign non-disclosure agreements or risk being pulled into ongoing investigations. If true, the tactic mirrors what Burroughs himself described in the documentary, a long-standing pattern of intimidation, financial leverage, and legal pressure designed to keep damaging stories contained. That possibility raises a disturbing implication that the version of events most people accept about Tupac Shakur's and Biggie Smalls' deaths may not just be incomplete, but carefully managed. So where does that leave us? With a documentary that feels less like a definitive reckoning and more like a controlled release, with a former bodyguard who insists he holds missing evidence, and with a legal storm that appears to be intensifying, not fading. Deal has promised promised to release his own footage in the coming weeks, including recordings he claims support his account. Conversations, he says, were cut from the Netflix series, warnings that went unheeded, and financial dealings that were never explained. If he follows through, the public may hear material that reframes what many believe about Combs's knowledge and involvement. But Deal isn't the only one with potential leverage. Burroughs still has his journals. Davis's trial could introduce new testimony, and buried somewhere in the archives of Bad Boy records may be contracts, receipts, or travel logs that tell a very different story than the one audiences have been shown. One thing is clear, this is no longer just about the past. The battles over Tupac Shakur's and Biggie Smalls' legacies are still playing out in courtrooms, boardrooms, and now on screens worldwide. And if Gene Deal is right, the most dangerous truths aren't the ones already debated in public, but the ones that were never meant to surface at all.
Pac would have boxed him. Pac would have loved to beat his ass in the ring, raise some money, and give it to the hood.
But the deeper this story goes, the clearer it becomes that this was never just about Tupac Shakur and Biggie Smalls. It's about the machinery that operated around them for decades, a system that shaped narratives, controlled access, and ensured the full picture never came into focus. And that machine isn't abstract. It has names, faces, and financial trails. Start with Alexandria Stapleton, the director behind Sean Diddy Combs' The Reckoning. Stapleton is no novice. She previously directed Shut Up and Dribble, the LeBron James produced series that tackled race, power, and political activism in sports. Her reputation is built on confronting influential figures, but also on understanding institutional limits. Sources close to the production say Stapleton faced intense pressure from Netflix's legal team, which allegedly flagged Gene Deal's claims as legally radioactive. The distinction matters. Burroughs' journals and Dwayne Keefe D. Davis's proffer statements are already part of the public record. Deal's allegations, by contrast, involve active financial trails, most notably the alleged $1 million check. If such evidence exists, it could be subpoenaed in Davis's upcoming trial. And if that trail leads back to Combs's inner circle, Netflix wouldn't just be telling a story, they'd be handing prosecutors a roadmap. According to insiders, that risk was a line the streamer refused to cross. Then there's who didn't get a voice in the documentary. Jimmy Henchman. Roseman's name appears only briefly, despite his alleged central role in the events leading up to the Quad Studios shooting. Rosemond is serving a life sentence in an unrelated case, but his former network, including figures tied to Bad Boy Records, remains active. Legal exposure, sources say, may explain why his role was minimized. And then there's Barry Hankerson, a powerful music executive and the father of Aaliyah. Hankerson's name surfaces in Deal's account of the alleged $1 million check. For years, hip-hop lore has linked him, through rumor and reporting, to financial relationships spanning Bad Boy and Death Row. He has never been charged in connection with Shakur's shooting. Still, if that check exists, it could place him uncomfortably close to a conspiracy stretching from New York to Los Angeles. Notably, Hankerson has never been interviewed in any of these major documentaries. Coincidence or deliberate framing? Because when you follow the money, you begin to understand where the real power lies, and why certain names, again and again, stay just outside the frame.
You receive more with not doing well than you receive. If I threw an excellent pitch.
We wouldn't even bring it up.
Sean Diddy Combs' empire wasn't built on hit records alone. It was built on contracts, publishing rights, and the kind of financial leverage that, according to critics, can silence people for decades. That context is central to understanding why so many of the most explosive allegations around Tupac Shakur and Biggie Smalls never seem to fully surface. Kirk Burroughs' lawsuit isn't just about unpaid equity in Bad Boy Records. At its core, Burroughs alleges a pattern of contractual manipulation, including claims that he was fired for refusing to alter Biggie Smalls' contract after the rapper's death. Changes, Burroughs says, would have redirected even more revenue to the label. Combs has denied those allegations, but the case has revived long-standing questions about who ultimately benefited from Biggie's legacy. Burroughs isn't alone. Former Bad Boy artist Mark Curry has publicly alleged that Combs pressured him into signing away his stake in the label, claims that Combs disputes. After Biggie's death, Combs retained control over the rapper's catalog, likeness, and posthumous releases. Legally, that may fall within industry norms, but critics argue that level of control represents something more than business. It represents power. And power, they say, doesn't just defend itself, it neutralizes threats before they gain traction. That brings us to what insiders describe as Combs' legal playbook: aggressive litigation. When singer Cassie Ventura filed a civil lawsuit in 2023, Combs' attorneys responded with a countersuit alleging extortion, a move legal experts note can deter accusers by escalating costs and pressure. A similar similar dynamic unfolded with Burroughs' initial lawsuit in the early 2000s, which was dismissed on procedural grounds. Now, with Burroughs' renewed case pending and Gene Deal threatening to release his own alleged evidence, sources claim Combs' legal team has again gone on the offensive. Several former Bad Boy employees say they've been approached with offers of five-figure settlements in exchange for signing strict non-disclosure agreements. One insider summarized the message bluntly: "This isn't about guilt or innocence. It's about controlling the narrative. And when that narrative involves two of the most infamous unsolved cases in hip-hop history, control isn't optional, it's everything."
Double back on him and said, "What you mean?" He said, "Well, look, Puffy used to come to the hood." He said, "You can ask James. You know, him and James always been good friends, you know. James is the one who went through some things." And
the suppression of Gene Deal's alleged footage, critics argue, isn't only about protecting Sean Diddy Combs. It's about shielding a much larger ecosystem, industry players who have profited for decades from carefully managed myths surrounding these deaths. Record labels, streaming platforms, and even estates have turned Tupac Shakur and Biggie Smalls into posthumous brands. The East Coast-West Coast rivalry is marketable. A clear, documentable conspiracy involving executives and finances is not. It's a legal and financial nightmare. The media's role can't be ignored either. From tabloids like TMZ to institutions such as the New York Times, these cases have been covered endlessly. Yet relatively few outlets have seriously examined the financial relationships connecting Bad Boy, Death Row, and the figures who moved between them. Critics say the reason is simple. Those connections lead to advertising dollars, exclusives, and access. Pushing too hard risks losing all three. That tension surfaced publicly in 2008 when the Los Angeles Times retracted a story that suggested Combs' involvement in Shakur's shooting. Officially, the paper cited concerns about sourcing. Unofficially, industry observers noted the intense pushback from Combs' legal team and the chilling effect such battles can have on future reporting. Now, the past is colliding with the present. Dwayne Keefe D. Davis's trial is scheduled for March 2026, and his attorneys have signaled they may call witnesses who could again tie Combs' name to the alleged plot. At the same time, Kirk Burroughs' civil lawsuit is entering discovery, a phase that could compel Bad Boy Records to produce internal documents, including journal entries that may shed new light on the Quad Studios shooting. And then there's Gene Deal. He claims he isn't just holding video footage, but signed affidavits from former security personnel present the night Biggie Smalls was killed. Deal insists that if even part of that material becomes public, it could trigger a domino effect, one that destabilizes the narrative that has stood for nearly 30 years. He may not be alone. Sources say at least 3 former Bad Boy employees have quietly spoken with a private investigator working with Shakur's estate, offering testimony that reportedly aligns with Deal's claims. Their identities remain confidential, but insiders say their accounts could fill in the gaps the Netflix documentary left conspicuously open.
On platform, he said this on your platform that he put up $1 million to get Pac in.
Yeah, correct. He was around Puffy and Puffy made it.
So why hasn't this story already detonated? According to critics, it's because the system is built to contain it. Sources familiar with the legal maneuvering say Sean Diddy, Combs' attorneys have explored preemptive strategies aimed at preventing Gene Deal's alleged footage from ever reaching a courtroom, arguing that such material would be hearsay, prejudicial, or legally unreliable. Whether those efforts succeed remains to be seen, but the intent is clear: stop the narrative before it hardens into evidence. Netflix, meanwhile, has declined to publicly address accusations of censorship. Insiders say the company is less focused on defending editorial choices than on bracing for potential litigation from Combs' camp. Then there are the FBI files. A 2018 Freedom of Information Act request confirmed the Bureau gathered intelligence on the Bad Boy Death Row feud, including interviews with individuals linked to both camps. Much of that material remains sealed. If Deal's claims intersect with what's already buried in those files, unlocking them would require someone willing to push past reputational, legal, and financial consequences. And once that happens, the fallout wouldn't stop with one man. It would reach everyone who benefited from keeping this story unresolved.
With the series, with the film.
I mean, I think the intention is to give a more full-bodied experience to what happened, you know, from the people that agreed to sit down and to participate. And I feel like the film asks a lot of questions, you know, maybe more questions are asked than answers given.
Let's also examine the role of the documentarians themselves, because this project didn't come together by accident. Alexandria Stapleton and Curtis 50 Cent Jackson were strategic choices. Stapleton brought institutional credibility, a filmmaker known for navigating sensitive subjects and powerful figures. Her resume, including Shut Up and Dribble, signals seriousness and restraint. She knows how far a story can be pushed and where the invisible lines are. 50 Cent, meanwhile, brought something else entirely: cultural weight, street credibility, a built-in audience primed to distrust Sean Diddy Combs. His long-running feud with Combs, spanning diss records, public mockery, and even a reported physical confrontation at a nightclub in 2019, cuts both ways. To some, that history makes 50 the ideal figure to expose uncomfortable truths. To others, it gives him motive to frame the story in ways that serve his own narrative. Then there's the money. This wasn't a passion project alone. The documentary was reportedly sold to Netflix for a sum rumored to be in the high seven figures. That level of investment comes with expectations about risk tolerance, legal exposure, and industry relationships. If protecting the platform from lawsuits or avoiding collateral damage to powerful players was part of the calculus, the editorial choices start to look less mysterious, which brings us to the heart of it. This isn't just a story about justice. It's about who gets to define what justice looks like and who decides when the truth is too dangerous to fully tell. What we do know is this: the pieces are in motion. Dwayne Keefe D. Davis's trial is approaching. Kirk Burroughs' lawsuit is advancing through discovery. Gene Deal says his footage exists, waiting for the right moment. And somewhere there are people who know exactly what happened, people who stayed silent because speaking out always came at too high a cost. But costs change, culture shifts, and the moment someone decides they have more to gain from telling the truth than from protecting the past, everything begins to unravel. So here's the question that lingers. If you were Gene Deal, sitting on material that could rewrite hip-hop history, would you release it, knowing it might burn every bridge you have left? And if you were Sean Diddy Combs, facing legal storms that threaten to resurrect the darkest chapters of your past, how far would you go to make sure that material never surfaces? This story isn't finished. It's accelerating. Stay alert, stay skeptical, and keep your eyes on the truth, because history has a way of resurfacing, no matter how deeply it's buried.